Here's the concept. Expansion, accelerating, has a restriction. Conjecture that the restriction generates sufficient energy to contract the expansive force. Through rotation, changing the acceleration in vector into translating it into various other vectors, including the I, the imaginary unit, square root of -1, which is actually square root of -2. I'll come back to it. That translation of a straight line energy of an expanding sphere into complex rotations creates an elastic response greater than the expansive force. So even if the expansive force is the infinite power of density of a black hole expanding, it's irrelevant because the elastic response is always relative to that, and there's always more elastic response. No matter how hard it pushes, it will always push back harder. How does it do that? So imagine the expanding light is at its limit. Stationary time, rest time, assume a sphere of light on a dark surface. What happens is that it has a meniscus, a skin, a surface tension on the expanding light. It is the surface tension itself that is the elastic response to the expansive force. The motion of expansion of light is that the surface turns inside out and rolls bigger and bigger. Because it's made of light, the spaces in between are just filled with light. Because there's light inside, it is light expanding, so the space is always filled up. So that's why you get infinite expansion. It can just, as the surface expands in this rolling motion of particles, it exponentially increases the surface area on the outside, so that the elastic response is always going to be greater. How fast can it fill the gaps in as it expands? And when it reaches that limit, that's c, speed of light, and it's not constant. The action of contraction, creating gravity, is thus that this expansive force must generate an elastic response in between, as a restriction on the speed of acceleration. It does a 720 twist. The only way the surface can turn inside out, this is Euler's identity and the rigid body axis theorem. Any displacement of a surface of a rigid body must result in a rotation at the center. Correct. And so what that proves is that the particles are solid. They're solid light. In a beat of each moment, there is a mass-light exchange, and that the light becomes solid. Here's the action. An expanding sphere of light is hollow, the soap bubble. The inside surface area is less than the outside surface area, regardless of how thin the skin, the elastic membrane is. You can either see it as a line where there is a different vector of acceleration, or you can just see a transition between 2 points, between 2 zones, a flat line. As the surface expands, the contractive response becomes greater. With the infinite force, it just keeps pushing. The response gets bigger and bigger, eventually leading to life. See my breathing video and the heartbeat. Physics model, the contractive response is greater than the expansive force, and therefore it contracts to a black hole density. But that action is now going on at black hole density, so that the surface rolling inside out in a black hole creates a solid. If you want to do an expansion of to measure expansion of surface tension, you need to start from a dot point with a radius equals 0. So a dot point of radius equals 0 exists. You need a starting point to measure the expansion of surface tension. What the observations in quantum show us is that there is no r equals 0. It's r equals 0 squared. A dot point has an area before it has a radius, and of a hollow sphere. And what it means is it's solid. That the surface turned itself inside out under a compression so dense that it just went smaller again. And so there was no hole in the center. It wasn't hollow. It was solid. The light became solid. And in that motion, reality is created, and it shows that reality is real. So time particle theory says we're made from real things. And we are solid light. There is a mass light exchange between the two in a beat of each moment. A moment is measured by Planck's constant. So it's 10 to the 6.626 times 10 to the minus 34 seconds duration of energy. So the units of Planck's constant are the meter second. So it's a meter second. Everything that happens inside that zone contains 1 beat of time. So that causality must be derived. You can't observe it because it's all happening in simultaneous time. Simultaneous time is measured in meter seconds. Everything looks simultaneous from each moment. If you derive the correct engineering, you can put it all in the right order and you see causality restored into quantum. Knowing that the observations in quantum are you observing solid light in the standard model. Now, what are neutrinos? Look at a yin-yang. Yeah? It has a dark area and a light area. The dark area represents bigness. The light area represents smallness. This exists in space. Seconds squared exists in space because it is balanced by meter squared. A two-dimensional force with no thickness, but it exists as rotation, meter squared, second squared. The meter squared is the size of the universe. The second squared is measured by Planck's constant, bigness and smallness. And so a rotation of bigness and smallness creates another moment of time, an additional moment of expansion, an additional moment of contraction in a balanced system. Balanced here at the center of the universe, in our atmosphere. And where ultimately is the boundary between the meter squared and the second squared when it exists in space? It's in our lungs, in our breath, where we do the energy exchange. So we exist. Our particles are made of solid light. We're real, made of solid light, and we're knitted together in a network of negative spaces in between. And it's proven by Dr. Levy, 1915. Here is my reference. Read it and weep. Engineering. It's all just engineering physicists. Welcome to the future. Follow the Rebel King.